I am over the moon to have Debbie Millman with me today. Hi, Debbie. How are you doing?
I'm good, Mary. Thank you. How are you?
I'm over the moon. I I I met Debbie. Was it 2018 or 2019? I came to your office at the School of Visual Art, New York, because I was writing a book on creativity, and you were the first person I wanted to interview.
Thank you.
You were so gracious. You were so gracious, and then I got distracted when I came back here to Mexico and started the whole Black Line Crazy thing. So I'm over the moon that you're joining me here today. Now, everybody will know Debbie Millman, but as host of the podcast Design Matters, one of my most favorite inspiring podcasts, it's almost your 15th year now, right, Debbie?
16 years tomorrow.
Amazing. You've interviewed over 500 artists and cultural commentators and amazing people about how they design the arc of their life, which I think is so inspiring. I mean, you wear so many hats, and I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, Debbie. As illustrator, your amazing works appeared in major publications. You co-founded the world's first graduate program in branding at the School of Visual Art in New York City. Author of 6 books. For 20 years as president of Sterling Brands. I remember having an interview there. I wish I'd known you then. One of the brand's leading brand consultancies, and you were instrumental in the firm's acquisition in 2008. So much more, but I just want to tell you, Debbie, that when we met, you had in your office a huge chalkboard with the word yes on it. I know there's a story there. Can you just, because I want to explore a little bit with you, how you have walked outside the line, how you have reimagined and reinvented your life in so many ways, and now you're wearing so many hats. But tell me, how did you come up with that yes for that inspiration in your office?
Well, it's a chalkboard with Keith Haring frame with his artwork, and it's very joyful. And I wanted to have one word. It's small. It's, maybe 5 by 7, and wanted to hang it up, and figured that really only one word would work there. And I just thought that was a positive way to think about the world. And my students are seeing this, and I just wanted them to feel welcome and open. So that's why I wrote yes.
It's inspiring because you teach your students a lot about living the dream of their life, don't you? I mean, that's a big...
Well, that's one exercise. That's not, I mean, in my branding program, in the master's program, that's just one exercise over the course of the entire program. And it's just one exercise in my class where there's, 10 other exercises. So yes, it is, writing the 10-year plan is a big, important experience, but it's just one of hundreds.
I bet. Well, I've listened to so many of your interviews, and I've been following you for such a long time, and you've always been so open and warm and heartfelt and strong and clear and purposeful. I know it's been, having a purposeful life. How do you teach that to others? How to become really clear about following what is calling you, so to speak?
Well, I think it's about showing people how you do it in some ways, and then also sharing the obstacles in doing that, so that people don't see their own obstacles as barriers. They just see them as things that they have to try to walk through. And so for me, it's about sharing as much of the underbelly as possible, because that's the part that I think scares people the most.
Mm-hmm. And that's how people learn too, because if you're open about one's underbelly, I love that expression, it gives people the courage to go out and step out and do it themselves.
Right.
It's not always easy, but that's the intention.
Oh, I don't think anything is easy about it, but except maybe talking about it. I think that it's the sort of challenge of our lives to try to live fully and try not to let fear hold us back. Because that's really what it is. The only reason we're not going to go after what we want is because we're afraid. And that is, I think, the challenge of our lives.
Mm-hmm. I remember hearing you once talk about how everything that's worthwhile takes a long time and a lot of effort. And I think you were saying how when you say that to yourself, it's very self-soothing. It's self-soothing, which to me is magic, because we need to soothe ourselves, right? For so many reasons, especially in this crazy, surreal time we're living in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the best sort of advice or counsel that I've gotten about this was from David Lee Roth, the lead singer of Van Halen, who, when I was asking him when I interviewed him for the podcast, I asked him, what it felt like to be sort of the most popular person on the planet in the 80s. When 1984 came out, their album, it was the number one album in the world. It was sex, drugs, rock and roll, money, fame. He had everything, right? And I asked him what that felt like. What does it feel like to be sort of at the peak of your career and have everything that you ever thought you wanted? And he said, you have to be careful when you get to the tippy top, because when you're there, you're usually alone. It's always cold and there's only one direction. And it really helped me understand even further something that I had said for a long time, which is that everything worthwhile takes a long time, in that it suddenly made sense that the journey up that mountain is something that is made with small steps. And I, at that point, realized, I hope I actually don't peak until the day before I die, because I don't ever want to think that my best work is behind me. I always want to be searching for something that is better than what I've done in the past. Mm-hmm. So, that gave me even more of a sense that was an important thing to consider when thinking about your life's work.
Mm-hmm. I know, Aisha, of course, Purcell,
yes,
who talks about, does her Design the Life You Love workshops and says our life is our biggest design project.
Right.
How did so many of us not know that for so long? I mean, why don't we learn this at schools, when we're in high school?
I know.
When we're 12 years old,
Yes. And living with intention and making a decision about how you want to live and what you want to spend your time doing. And so many of my undergrad students are editing what's possible for their lives before they even begin to experiment. And they're afraid that they're not smart enough or pretty enough or thin enough or networked enough or rich enough or anything enough. And,
right.
The idea that they are enough and can choose whatever makes their heart sing at that point in their lives, that's the freedom I want to be able to share with them and imbue in them, because I didn't feel that way when I graduated, for sure. And if I can help young people make those intentional decisions mm-hmm. before they start editing what's possible or what's impossible before it's even possible, that is, a gift.
That's the biggest gift of all. I know. Because as children, we're always so fearless, right? Fearless.
I think it depends on how you're brought up. Parents, children that are well parented tend to be more fearless, have more confidence because they feel okay as is. They are loved and cherished for who they are. Others that aren't grow up always feeling that they have so much more that they have to prove and that they're not okay as is. And that's a really hard thing to overcome. Yeah. And I would say that most young people that I encounter have more of that than that feeling of, I am enough, I'm good enough. And I can always tell those students that are well parented and they're joyful. It's an incredible thing to see a young person that's been well parented.
Mm-hmm. I'm a motherless daughter. My mother died at 13, so I really realized that I had to learn how to, I mean, I had a wonderful father and sister, and things change pretty quickly. But it's interesting how you realize how we all come into the arena, right? And we all have different things we're struggling with. And as I said, I really wish, when I was in Australia, I was thinking, why aren't we leading more classes for kids, who are 11 and 12 to really to deal with all this stuff, so we're not doing this, later on.
Yes.
But I've always loved your site, Debbie. I've done led a lot of brand workshops, and your site is always so it's constant. I mean, it changes, but you wear so many hats. For those who aren't aware of their debbiemillman.com, you have sections as artist, designer, writer, educator, brand consultant, speaker, illustrator, visual storyteller, graphic filmmaker, co-chair, School of Visual Art, Masters in Branding, curator, advocate, and political commentary. And there's even your favorite foods and restaurants in New York. Makes me miss, when I read your list of favorite places, it makes me miss New York a lot. But what I love about it is that you, by example, because some time ago, by example, you own and make clear all the different paths that you pursue. I mean, I don't want to call them wearing different hats. I mean, I happen to like wearing hats, especially when it's cold, which it is here. But it's there. I've met so many people and had clients who say, well, if I'm doing this professionally, how can I also in this, following this pursuit, because people won't take me seriously. This is it's very old fashioned now too, of course, because we're all doing different things now more than ever, especially this year. But I've always admired and been inspired by the fact that you wear all those different hats and you write about them. I know that when you went to college, you were still looking to work out what you wanted to do, and you loved that newspaper newsletter.
I'm still working it all out, and so yeah.
But when you think of when you were then, and you look at all the different things that you've done, I mean, were you just called in were different things opportunities just kept coming along, right? And you would say yes, and then reinvent your world to follow that, or reframe it so that you could
I would say that opportunities just sort of came along. The only opportunities that really came along, there were two that were sort of handed to me, and that's the Masters in Branding program with Steve.
Right.
Steve Heller. He recommended me for that program at the School of Visual Arts, and then we co-founded it. And then I got the cold call to do Design Matters from Voice America back in 2005 or 2004 when they first reached out. And that was something that I then sort of made my own. But mostly everything else I've had to either work really, really hard for, or ask for, or put myself in the path for. It's been, a journey.
Well, with the focus of Design Matters on people, the arc of people's lives, where do you think that comes from? Is that something you've always been interested in, how people shape their lives? Is that just part of your DNA, do you think?
I would say I'm endlessly fascinated by how people become who they are.
Right.
And the way in which people make something from nothing. Where is that magic? What is that? Whether it be a piece of design or a Broadway musical or a song or a book or a poem, the idea that people are creating something via the sheer force of their imagination, that's magic to me. And I am endlessly fascinated by how people do that, how people make these things. And so I just love being able to ask people about it, and it just feels like the holy grail to me. And so that's just something I can't imagine ever not being interested in.
Right. It's certainly magical, isn't it? The stories.
Yeah, very much so.
There's one, I think, I can't remember who it was, but someone asked you what was the common, if you could identify a common thread, if there was something in common that many of your guests had in common as creatives and design thinkers, what was that one thing? Because is that something you've always picked up on and noticed about your guests?
It's something that, because people have asked me about, I've had to really give it a lot of thought. And over the years, I've been struck by the fact that creative people are always wanting and needing to be creative. And that comes with questioning one's ideas and motives and output, and looking back and looking forward. And it seems to me that almost every person I've ever spoken to is still searching and still questioning. And the only two people that I feel were just really okay as is, being who they were at the time I interviewed them, was Massimo Vignelli and Milton Glaser. And they were both in their 80s.
Wow.
I interviewed them. So I think that, as artists, by the time we're 80, I guess we have less F's to give. And I loved that they were really just comfortable with what they had done, who they were, and the sort of confidence that they brought into their daily living to make more, was just awe-inspiring. So yeah, I aspire to that.
Oh, to be 80, right?
Yeah.
Ay, ay, ay. Well, one of my favorite quotes is by Maya Angelou. It goes, life loves to be taken by the lapel and told, I'm with you, kid, let's go. Is that not amazing? It's sort of
gorgeous.
whenever.
That's beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous.
I just feel like, and that's a wonderful thing that you probably teach too at the SBA, is how to have that feeling that, yes, life is.
That's why I have that word there.
There's something lovely about feeling you're being taken up by the lapel and said, let's do this, let's go.
Yeah.
What an amazing way of being. So Debbie, I often think, Blackline Crazy sort of took me, the art starting to paint for the first time in my life a few years ago, and designing the products and stuff. I didn't have a plan for that. It sort of took me by the hand and led me down a path I couldn't have imagined. I know you make lists. I know you love making lists, but there are things that have just taken you by the hand and led you down a path that you could never have imagined, right? Are there one or two? Was that like?
Well, certainly a podcast. I wasn't ever planning to do a radio show. I was never planning on that radio show turning into a podcast and doing it now for 16 years. That was not ever on a list of anything, because it just didn't even seem feasible. It was inconceivable to me.
Yes.
So certainly that has been one of the unexpected joys of my career. Having this opportunity to talk with people. And, now that it is 16 years, tomorrow will be 16 years since the first broadcast. The markers like anniversaries are really important to me.
Right.
And I really pause when I have them to assess. And this year in particular, because of COVID and just the obstacles that we're all facing in our daily lives, and the fact that I still can do this and have this opportunity to be able to share the inner creative lives of so many extraordinary people is something that I feel very grateful for.
How have you managed this year? It's been, the last 10 months, the last year, all of 2020.
It's been a challenge. First worrying about my family. One of my brothers did get COVID, and that was really scary. He's a healthcare practitioner. He's a doctor. And so that was something that was very, very nerve-wracking. And I ended up moving to Los Angeles in March of 2020 to be with my then fiance, now wife, so that we could be together. And, initially she was like, pack for 2 weeks. We didn't know that this was going to be what it was. And we ended up spending 6 months in Los Angeles, then went back to New York. Now I'm back in Los Angeles. So that's been challenging as well, just being away from my home, what was one of my homes, but the place that I've spent pretty much my whole life. I've never lived outside of New York until last year. And then it was half a year. So that was a first for me. And then just having to translate a very intense in-person experience in the classroom to an online experience in a matter of days. And I'm not particularly tech savvy. In fact, I'm a technophobe. And so it was very difficult to make that transition, lots of frustration. But now I'm fine. I actually really have come to enjoy the democracy that online learning can provide in terms of the way everybody shows up and the way that you can engage a classroom in a different way. And so I am actually enjoying that. And the students are doing well, so that is really important to me. But I'm not somebody that does change well. I go kicking and screaming, and then once I'm comfortable, I'll embrace it.
Right.
But until that point, I'm really resistant. But making the best of everything as best as I can.
That's all we can do, right? We're being asked to do that, basically, right?
Yeah.
To do the best we can.
How about you? How are you managing?
Well, things aren't so good here in Mexico. Sometimes I feel quite connected with Zoom, with the work that I'm doing and clients and networking with friends and business colleagues and everything. Sometimes I feel connected because I'm talking to more people all around the world than I ever have. It's pretty amazing. But it's tough, it is tough. It's not so good here. Not so good in LA either, is it?
It isn't, and yeah. I just don't go out very much. We have a nice backyard, and I spend a lot of time in the backyard. And yeah, I don't really do very much outside the house.
Debbie, we're going to wrap up in about a few minutes. Did I hear that you were writing a book? Are you writing another book at the moment?
I'm writing a book. It's called Why Design Matters, and it's an anthology of my best interviews over the years.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Is that going to come out Is it going to come out on
October 2021? Yeah. So in 8 months or 9 months, something like that.
Is that a special anniversary date? Is that a special?
No. That's just the pub date.
Pub date. Yeah. Well, Debbie, I'm so thrilled to have this conversamos with you. Would you dare all of us, one thing that might help us to walk outside the line or go out on a limb or just think a little differently?
Well, one of my favorite things to tell my students is busy is a decision. And, when they say, oh, I can't do that, I'm too busy. And I'm like, really? Like, don't you determine how you spend your time? Yes. And so oftentimes I've come to realize that when I say I'm too busy, it's because it's not a priority. We make the time to do what we want to do. You don't find the time, you make the time. Yeah. And so if we're using busy as an excuse not to do something, chances are we don't really, really want to do it as much as we're doing other things. And right. So if you really want to do something, make the time to do it. If not now, when? That's exactly something that I think about all the time.
Choices, right? We have to make that choice and stick by it.
Yes.
Choices are very hard for a lot of people, aren't they?
Yes. You have to then sort of be accountable to yourself, and that's hard.
Okay, I'm going to think about that today. Make some good choices.
Yes.
Thank you, Debbie. I'm so sorry. I hope this stream is working well. You're my third interview. I'm so thrilled.
Thank you.
And it means a lot. And one day I'll do that book, and I'll be back knocking on your door to interview you.
Anytime, Mary. It's wonderful talking to you as always.
Wonderful. Absolutely. We'll have a great rest of your day. Oh, that's right. Of course, you're 2 hours. I was thinking you might have been back in New York. Oh, good. So it's LA time.
Yeah.
Fabulous, Debbie. Good care. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Ciao. Ciao, Bella.
Thank you. Stay safe.